This program is supported by SMC Global Power.
Hello, I'm Alma Angeles and you're watching Eagle News International. Good evening, CJ.
Good evening, Alma, and good evening to everyone joining the broadcast on tonight's headlines.
The United States on Friday accused China of an escalation against the Philippines and warned that an armed attack would invite a U.S. response after an incident in the disputed waters.
The Philippines will soon welcome back foreign tourists, according to the government, as it prepares a partial reopening to vaccinated travelers.
Austria will impose a lockdown for all and make vaccinations mandatory.
And the longest partial lunar eclipse in nearly 600 years, which will bathe the moon in red, was visible for a big slice of humanity today.
First in our news, the United States today accused China of an escalation against the Philippines and warned that an armed attack would invite a U.S. response after an incident in the disputed waters. The United States stands with our ally, the Philippines, in the face of this escalation that directly threatens regional peace and stability, according to State Department spokesman Ned Price in Abuja, where Secretary of State Antony Blinken was traveling. The action escalates regional tensions, infringes upon freedom of navigation in the South China Sea as guaranteed under international law, and undermines the rules-based international order. He also warned that any armed attack on Philippine public vessels would invoke the 1951 U.S.-Philippines Treaty, in which Washington is obliged to defend its ally. The Philippines said the Chinese Coast Guard on Tuesday fired a water cannon against boats delivering supplies to Filipino Marines, forcing them to halt their mission. The incident came as the Filipinos were traveling to Second Thomas Shoal in the Spratly Islands, one of a series of hotly contested areas in the South China Sea. The Philippines earlier voiced outrage, condemnation, and protest. China defended its actions, saying that it acted to safeguard China's sovereignty as the Filipinos had not been in contact on their movements.
India will scrap agricultural reform laws that sparked a fear of huge protests in farmers, according to Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Friday, in a stunning U-turn that sparked celebrations but also criticisms from economists. Take a look.
साथियों, मैं आज देशवासियों से क्षमा मांगते हुए सच्चे मन से और पवित्र हृदय से कहना चाहता हूं कि शायद हमारी तपस्या में ही कोई कमी रही होगी, जिसके कारण दिए के प्रकाश जैसा सत्य कुछ किसान भाइयों को हम समझा नहीं पाए। आज मैं आपको, पूरे देश को ये बताने आया हूं कि हमने 3 कृषि कानूनों को वापस लेने का, रिपील करने का निर्णय लिया है। इस महीने के अंत में शुरू होने जा रहे संसद सत्र में, इसी महीने में, हम 3 कृषि कानूनों को रिपील करने की संवैधानिक प्रक्रिया को पूरा कर देंगे।
The reforms passed in September 2020 aim to deregulate farm produce markets, where state bodies have for decades set guaranteed minimum prices for crops. Modi's government said the reforms would help fix a sector that it says is massively inefficient. But farmers feared the changes would have left them at the mercy of big corporations. Thousands of Indian farmers commit suicide every year because of poverty, debt, and even more erratic weather patterns caused by climate change. Now, Modi's reversal came ahead of important elections for his Bharatiya Janata Party in states such as Punjab and Uttar Pradesh, both home to huge numbers of farmers.
Now to the pandemic news. Prime Minister Kim Boo-kyum called Friday for efficient hospital bed management as South Korea continues to see a rising number of critically ill COVID patients amid no signs of let-up in daily infections. Take a look. Now, Kim said the government's priority will be swiftly adding hospital beds and supporting medical resources needed at hospitals as quickly as possible. Under the pressure, serious patients in the capital area can be sent to available intensive care beds in non-capital areas. Prime Minister Kim ordered the authorities to beef up the country's patient transport system with air ambulances to support their transfer. According to Yonhap, the country's new COVID cases stayed above 3,000 for the third consecutive day today. As of Thursday, 78.2% of intensive care beds in the capital area were in use, with Seoul recording 80.9%, ringing alarm bells for health authorities. The number of critically ill COVID patients has been going up in recent weeks, with the latest tally reaching 499 after the country started its Living with COVID-19 scheme this month, with eased social distancing for people's gradual return to normal life.
The Philippines will soon welcome back foreign tourists, according to the government, as it prepares a partial reopening to vaccinated travelers 20 months after closing its borders to contain the coronavirus. Take a look. Now, tourism operators across the archipelago nation, famed for its beaches and dive spots, have been devastated by a plunge in international visitors and restrictions on domestic travel since the start of the pandemic. Now, the government's COVID-19 task force has approved in principle the tourism department's request to permit entry to vaccinated travelers from countries with a low infection rate, according to Tourism Secretary Berna Puyat. Now, borders will reopen soon, according to the statement, without providing date. The government has eased virus restrictions in recent weeks as the daily infection rate hovers at the lowest level since the beginning of the year, and the nationwide vaccination rate increases.
Staying here in the country, the Department of Health today reported that Delta cases continue to go down despite being the predominant variant of the coronavirus. In a virtual media briefing, DOH spokesperson Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergere said the country is at low to minimal risk case classification as of Wednesday, although 9 out of 10 cases are attributed to the highly transmissible variant. Take a look.
So sa ngayon, nakikita natin may transmission pa rin ongoing. Pagamat bumababa, nakita natin na talagang bumaba. So the question would be, kahit na ang Delta variant is highly transmissible, bakit natin siya napababa ng husto ng ganito pagkatapos ng pagtaas ng kaso? Unang-una, masasabi natin na naging effective ang ating PDITR plus na response, yung ating prevention, detection, isolation, testing and treatment, and vaccination. Dito po sa National Capital Region, we were able to ramp up our vaccinations kahit po tumataas sa mga kaso ay patuloy tayong nagbakuna. And nakita ho natin ang epekto nitong pagbabakuna na ito dito po sa mga naging pagbaba ng kaso dito po sa National Capital Region. Pangalawa, nakita ho natin kung paano nagawa ng ating local governments ang effective and intensive response sa mga komunidad. Doon po sa mga granular lockdown areas sa ating communities, we were able to note and it was reported na yung kanilang detection to isolation ay napaikli nila ng 2 araw. At napakalaking bagay po yan para ma-control or ma-prevent po natin ang pagkalat ng infection sa komunidad.
Austria will impose a lockdown for all and make vaccinations mandatory. Chancellor Alexander Schallenberg announced that, making the country the first in the EU to take such stringent measures as coronavirus cases spiral. The Alpine nation plans to make COVID-19 vaccinations mandatory from February 1st next year, while the lockdown will start from Monday and will be evaluated after 10 days. Take a look.
Beschluss, dass wir sehr rasch jetzt eine bundesweite Impfpflicht in die Wege leiten. Diese soll bereits ab 1. Februar nächsten Jahres 2022 gelten.
The chancellor blamed those refusing to be vaccinated for an attack on the health system. The lockdown means people are no longer allowed to leave their houses, with few exceptions, such as shopping for essentials and exercising. At the beginning of this week, Austria already began a lockdown for those not vaccinated or recently cured, becoming the first EU country to do so. But infections have continued to rise. On Thursday, a new record of more than 15,000 new cases were recorded in the Alpine EU member of nearly 9 million people.
Meanwhile, the head of Germany's disease control agency on Friday cast doubt on whether new government restrictions to fight coronavirus would be enough to break a vicious fourth wave of the pandemic. The director of the Robert Koch Institute, Lothar Weiler, told reporters that with record-breaking infection levels, the nationwide curbs on the unvaccinated were insufficient. Take a look.
Es ist 11:05. Das hier ist die aktuelle Karte der 7-Tages-Inzidenzen aus Deutschland. Sie sehen, dass fast alle Landkreise tiefrot sind. Im Süden und im Osten sehen Sie auch diese pinkfarbenen Landkreise. Das sind etliche Landkreise, in denen die 7-Tage-Inzidenz über 500 liegt. In vielen liegt sie über 800, ja 900, 4 sogar über 1000. In diesen Bundesländern kommen Krankenhäuser und Intensivstationen jetzt schon an ihre Kapazitätsgrenzen. Und es ist nicht absehbar, dass sich die Lage dort entspannen wird. Andere Bundesländer sind im Moment noch nicht an diesem Punkt. Wir müssen aber davon ausgehen, dass sich die Situation überall in Deutschland weiter verschärfen wird und das ohne zusätzliche Maßnahmen auch nicht mehr aufzuhalten.
As cases have topped 300 per 100,000 people, the rules for public spaces are no longer enough in the current situation, he said, calling it an absolute emergency. Weiler called for big events to be canceled, clubs and bars to be shuttered, and private contacts limited to stop the spread of the virus. Germans should stay home when they can, he said. Chancellor Angela Merkel and the leaders of Germany's 16 states agreed on Thursday to shut the unvaccinated out of restaurants, sporting events, and cultural shows after new cases soared to an all-time daily high of more than 65,000. To protect the most vulnerable, they also agreed to introduce compulsory vaccination for healthcare workers and employees in elderly homes. After a strong push in the spring, Germany's inoculation rate stagnated over the summer to hover at just under 70%.
Europe must close the gap on vaccinations to stop its COVID-19 surge, with the UN jabbed driving a rise in hospitalizations. The EU's drug watchdog said that Thursday. Now, the warning from the European Medicines Agency, or EMA, came as the continent battles a fresh wave of the pandemic with record cases in several countries. Take a look.
Transmissible, we are seeing in Europe a considerable increase in the number of cases. We are in the midst of what is called the fourth wave. We are seeing an excessive number of cases of COVID, including severe COVID and hospitalization or admission in the intensive care unit, particularly in the unvaccinated. We should not forget that still in many member states there is a large portion of the population, including subjects at risk above 50 years of age, that are not yet vaccinated, and they are the ones that are most likely to go to the hospital and suffer from the consequences of severe COVID-19, including mortality. So we should not forget that we should close this gap and make sure that as many people as possible will get vaccinated. The CHMP is also looking at Paxlovid, which is the oral antiviral treatment developed by Pfizer. This medicine is showing some promising preliminary results, and in view of the critical situation in many member states, the EMA executive director has also asked the CHMP to look at this medicine to give advice on its emergency use in member states prior to a possible marketing authorization. The procedure will start tomorrow.
A full review for approval of the drug, which could take months, is expected to start next week. Pharma giant Merck's rival pill, meanwhile, could get approval by the end of the year. COVID pills are seen as potentially groundbreaking because they can be easily and relatively cheaply and given to protect at-risk people, such as the elderly or those with immune system problems. With cases among children surging, the EMA said it expected to decide as early as next week on whether to approve the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine for the 5 to 11 age group.
Meanwhile, Macau imposed new travel regulations for non-residents. Here's Kit Wong for the report. Kit.
Macau imposed new regulations for non-residents who wants to enter Macau. Macau government requires non-residents to provide proof of sufficient capital for at least 7 days, believed to be a way to prevent illegal workers. Proper measures and important notes for tourists were also included. Proof of enough capital to survive for at least 7 days was issued by the chief executive today. The rules of entry and residence of foreigners in the country will change from November 15 and force with the revised immigration control and residence. Official reports stated that a non-resident who wants to stay in the city for more than 7 days must prove that he has at least 5,000 badagas, or $623 going up to 10,000 badagas for 14 days, to 15,000 badagas until 21 days, and to 21,000 badagas for a period of time above 21 days. They should also provide proof that they have enough subsistence, either by live cash, other negotiable instruments, live travelers' checks, or securities, e-wallet, and other similar electronic payment methods that are accepted in the city. Some residents believe that the new regulations are for a good cause, as former Legislative Council member Shou Zhou, as he believes that these can further protect the city and to protect the local social environment based on the current situation. It has been said by the public security police force may waive or reduce the requirements depending if the party meets the stringent requirements or criteria by the city, such as owning a credit card issued by an authorized financial institution in Macau or abroad. There are also reminders for tourists when visiting Macau. Visitors from foreign countries are prohibited unless eligible for exemption application, which is the COVID-19 immigration restrictions. Visitors from mainland China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan region, on the other hand, are prohibited from entering the city if they have visited a foreign country for 21 days or more prior to arriving in the city. They must also provide a certificate of negative result of COVID-19 nucleic acid test performed within 24 hours and will need to go to designated places for a 14-day medical observation if they have visited Hong Kong, 21 days for Taiwan, and 14 days for mainland China. With the pandemic situation still at large, it is yet to be controlled. Macau government are making sure that the residents are safe from possible foreign transmission and safe from illegal workers, which can affect the city's economy. Since March 2020, Macau closed its borders for foreign tourists, causing a great impact on its economy. As the world's largest casino market, Macau relies heavily on tourism. During the pandemic, dozens of foreign workers from hotels, casinos, and small businesses lost their jobs and were repatriated to their own countries. Last month, Macau implemented its third round of mass testing. It comes after the discovery of the 72nd case after a 46-year-old male worker who traveled from Zhuhai to Macau tested positive for COVID-19. The third mass testing lasts for 3 days, where the government aimed to test the entire population of some 650,000 people in around 40 testing stations. The government of Macau calls on citizens, locals and non-locals, to stay at home as much as possible to reduce unnecessary activities and mass gatherings. From Macau, this is Kit Wong, reporting for Eagle News, and we live in interesting times.
Thanks, Kit. And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. Mailalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa new era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Hi, I'm Alex Calleja, isang podcaster, YouTuber, writer, director, at isang stand-up comedian for more than 12 years. Kaya naman, heto na ang funniest Nakawall Videos! Ang natatanging show na bubusugin ang buong sambenan sa katatawanan! Ito ang bagong tambayan ng buong pamilya at barkada. Mula Lunes hanggang Biyernes nyo kami makakasama tuwing 4:30 p.m. Dito lang sa Net 25. Dito, mapapanood natin ang best comedy videos na hinanap pa namin sa kasuluk-sulukan ng internet. So ano pang hinihintay nyo? Join na sa pinakabago at pinakamasayang afternoon habit ng tawanan at kulitan, ang funniest Nakawall Videos!
innovation, digital disruption, globalization. Startups, micro, small, and medium enterprises, as well as large corporations, all face interesting challenges in the market today. Peek into the world of exciting opportunities and partnerships to drive growth with the latest business news and information. We are open for business. Your weekly dose of entrepreneurial inspiration to update you on the latest developments in the world of business. Get up close and personal with CEOs and thought leaders to help you discover valuable insights. Sharpen your instincts for smart decision-making with the latest markets and economic trends, disruptive ideas, global innovation, social entrepreneurship, and other leading-edge business ideas. Join the conversations to create a more vibrant environment for entrepreneurship. Catch Open for Business, from vision to action.
Welcome back to the news. China's foreign ministry accuses the United States of violating the Olympic spirit after President Joe Biden said he was considering a diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Winter Olympics over human rights abuses. Take a look.
将体育运动政治化，有违奥林匹克精神，损害的是各国运动员的利益。中方坚信，在奥林匹克精神的指引下，在各方共同努力下，我们一定能为世界呈现一届简约、安全、精彩的奥运盛会。
So do you support a diplomatic boycott of the Beijing?
President Joe Biden said Thursday he was considering a U.S. diplomatic boycott of the Winter Olympics in Beijing in what would be an attempt to show toughness over China's rights abuses without impacting U.S. athletes. The U.S. president is under pressure at home to speak out on China's human rights abuses, especially in the Xinjiang region, where the U.S. government says repression of the Uyghur ethnic group qualifies as genocide. Campaigners say that at least 1 million Uyghurs and other Turkic-speaking, mostly Muslim minorities have been incarcerated in camps in Xinjiang, where China is also accused of forcibly sterilizing women and imposing forced labor.
In other news, the consortium of U.S. states announced a joint probe Thursday of Instagram's parent company Meta for promoting the app to children despite allegedly knowing its potential for harm in fresh regulatory trouble for the scandal-hit network. The social media giant is battling one of its most serious reputational crises yet after a whistleblower leaked reams of internal documents showing executives knew of their site's risks for teens' well-being, prompting a renewed U.S. push for regulation. Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Healey said in a statement, Facebook, now Meta, has failed to protect young people on its platforms and instead chose to ignore or, in some cases, double down on known manipulations that pose a real threat to physical and mental health, exploiting children in the interest of profit, unquote. The consortium of Attorney General, states, top law enforcers, and legal advisors includes New York, Colorado, California, Florida, Kentucky, Nebraska, New Jersey, Tennessee, and Vermont. The investigation targets, among other things, Meta's techniques for increasing the frequency and duration of engagement by young users and the resulting harms, according to California Attorney General Rob Bonta. And this comes after reports revealing that Meta's own internal research shows that using Instagram is associated with increased risks of physical and mental health harms on young people, including depression, eating disorders, and even suicide, according to Bonta's statement. Meta fired back at the probe, saying the allegations were untrue and that it has worked to protect youth online. All right, and now we go to the United Kingdom, where the RAF claims e-fuel flight for the United Kingdom. Here's Janelle Kasuga for that report. Janelle.
Thank you, Alma. And yes, Britain's Royal Air Force, or the RAF, has set a world first by completing the first flight using only synthetic fuel, the Ministry of Defence has said. Let's take a look. Group Captain Peter Hackett completed a short flight in an Eclipse C-42 microlight aircraft at an airfield in Gloucestershire, Western England, earlier this month. The ministry said it had the potential to save 80 to 90% of carbon per flight and help the Air Force's aim of using only synthetic fuel to power fast jets in the future. Jeremy Quinn, the Minister of Defence Procurement, said that this is a world-first innovation. Additionally, the government has set a target of Britain reaching net zero carbon emissions by 2050. He later added, whilst green technologies like electric and hydrogen power generations are viable for many RAF platforms, high-performance aircraft require a liquid fuel alternative like the UL-91 to maintain operational capabilities. The aviation industry, one of the biggest emitters of greenhouse gases, has embarked on a major effort to green its image and develop less polluting fuels. The RAF is planning its first airbase to be net zero by 2025 and be carbon neutral across the service by 2040. To be more environmentally friendly, the electricity needed to produce it must be decarbonized and come from renewable or nuclear sources. These cutting-edge technologies are experimental, but are still much more expensive than renewable fuels that are being more widely tested by the industry and cost more than kerosene. Alma?
All right, thank you very much for that report, Janelle, and stay safe.
Thank you for having me. Reporting from London, United Kingdom, I'm Janelle Kasuga. We live in interesting times.
Tens of millions of red crabs crawl across Christmas Island as they migrate from the forest to the coast in the annual migration. Roads are closed as the crabs cuddle over the ground and across specially built bridges. Take a look.
Meanwhile, hundreds of migrants have again tried to cross the border from Belarus, according to police officials or Polish officials today, despite signs of an easing of the crisis after migrants left a makeshift encampment. Border guards said there were 2 attempted crossings on what is the eastern border of the European Union and NATO, one involving 500 migrants, some of whom threw rocks and tear gas canisters. The border guards said they had detained 45 migrants. migrants. Belarusian state news agency Belta said 2,000 migrants who had been camped out in freezing conditions on the border spent the night in a nearby warehouse after clearing out of their camp. Belta published photos and videos of the migrants lying on mats in the facility and wrote that for several it was their first warm night. Meanwhile, hundreds of Iraqis who had failed to cross into the EU from Belarus returned home on Thursday on the first repatriation flight organized by Baghdad. An Iraqi Airways plane brought 431 people home. The West accuses Belarus of artificially creating a migrant crisis by bringing in would-be migrants and taking them to the border with a promise of an easy crossing into the EU. Belarus has denied this and urged the EU to take them in. The EU and US this week announced fresh sanctions on the Belarusian regime, which has crushed political opposition and independent media since a disputed presidential election last year. The EU and foreign ministers of the G7 global powers called on Alexander Lukashenko's regime to cease immediately its aggressive and exploitative campaign.
Partially vaccinated employees tasked to do on-site work are not required to take regular reverse transcription, polymerase chain reaction, or RT-PCR tests, according to Malacanang. The new testing protocol for on-site workers was contained in the Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases Resolution 149, approved Thursday, according to Acting Presidential Spokesperson and Cabinet Secretary Carlo Nograles in a virtual press briefing. Take a look.
Offices. We would like to clarify that except in cases when all the on-site employees or workers of an establishment are required under the alert level system guidelines to be fully vaccinated, all partially vaccinated employees in the public and private sector tasked to do on-site work need not undergo regular RT-PCR testing at their own expense, as long as their second dose is not yet due. Ang employer ang magsasabi kung gaano kadalas ang RT-PCR testing para sa mga empleyado na hindi pa fully vaccinated na nasa on-site. And this should be done at least once every 2 weeks. At least once every 2 weeks.
Eagle News will be back with more stories. Please don't go away.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Welcome back. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida announced a record $490 billion stimulus for the world's third largest economy as he looks to shore up the country's patchy pandemic recovery. The 56 trillion yen injection, the third since the COVID crisis struck last year, is enough to deliver a sense of safety and hope to the Japanese people, according to the Prime Minister. The vast spending plans are expected to be approved by the cabinet later in the day and reportedly include cash and coupon handouts to families with children under 18 who meet an income cap, as well as pay rises for nurses and care workers. The Prime Minister said the 56 trillion in spending, roughly 10% of Japan's total GDP, was expected to rise as high as 79 trillion yen, including other elements such as loans from private funds. And this comes after Japan's economy shrank far more than expected in the second quarter as leaders struggle to overcome virus surges by imposing containment measures in Tokyo and other cities.
U.S. President Joe Biden commemorates the opening of Factory Zero, General Motors' first electric pickup truck factory in Hamtramck outside Detroit, Michigan. Take a look.
Hello, Detroit! And that Hummer's one hell of a vehicle, man. Yo! China and the rest of the world are catching up. Well, we're about to turn that around in a big, big way. We're going to be building again. We're going to be moving again. And folks, when you see these projects starting in your hometowns, I want you to feel the way I feel, pride in what we can do when we're together as the United States of America. And it starts here in Detroit. In the auto industry, Detroit's leading the world in electric vehicles. With this infrastructure law, along with my Build Back Better plan, we're going to kickstart new batteries, materials, and parts production and recycling, boosting the manufacturing of clean vehicles with new loans and new tax credits, creating new purchase incentives for consumers to buy American-made, union-made clean vehicles, like the electric Hummer.
The celebration at the Detroit area plant comes ahead of initial commercial deliveries of the GMC Hummer pickup, the first EV pickup by a Big Three company, as Detroit attempts to extend its dominance in the lucrative U.S. truck market amid challenges by Tesla and newer upstarts. The EV Hummer pickup is the first of a spate of behemoths from Detroit's legacy car makers going electric. Ford has unveiled an EV version of its top-selling F-150 pickup, while Chrysler owner Stellantis announced plans for an EV Ram pickup truck as a part of a growing fleet. It's been an accelerated push on the part of legacy companies in the wake of competition, not only from Tesla, but from EV startups like Rivian and others soared recently on Wall Street.
And finally, in our news, the longest partial lunar eclipse in nearly 600 years, which will bathe the moon in red, was visible for a big slice of humanity today. The celestial show will see the lunar disk almost completely cast in shadow as it moves behind the Earth, reddening 99% of its face. The spectacle was visible for all of North America and parts of South America from 06:02 GMT Friday, and may later be seen in Polynesia, Australia, and Northeast Asia. By 07:50 GMT, sky watchers with a cloud-free view in those regions saw the moon half covered by the Earth's penumbra, the outer shadow. Space scientists said Thursday that by 08:45 GMT, the moon would appear red with the most vivid coloring visible at peak eclipse eclipse 18 minutes later. The dramatic red is caused by a phenomenon known as Rayleigh scattering, where the shorter blue light waves from the sun are dispersed by particles in the Earth's atmosphere. Red light waves, which are longer, pass easily through these particles. The more dust or clouds in the Earth's atmosphere during the eclipse, the redder the moon will appear, according to a NASA website. From the moment the eclipse began, when the moon entered the Earth's shadow, to when it ends will take more than 3 hours and 28 minutes. And that is the longest partial eclipse since 1440, around the time Johannes Gutenberg invented his printing press, and it won't be beaten until the far-off future of 2669. But moon watchers won't have to wait that long for another show. There will be a longer total lunar eclipse on November 8th next year, according to NASA. Even better news for anyone wanting to watch is that no special equipment is necessary, unlike for solar eclipses.
Well, that's a good reason to look up. That's it for tonight's broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I am CJ Hero. The news continues tomorrow.
And at the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. We'll see you back tomorrow. I'm Alma Angeles, and we live in interesting times.
This program is supported by SMC Global Power,